This is official PlayStation Magazine Demo Disc 17. I remember stealing this from a friend of mine when I was a teen, and since then I remember playing a lot of games on it like Klonoa, WCW Revenge, Defcon 5 Warzone, and this one game that caught my eye, Dead or Alive, which I decided to pick myself up a copy for the PlayStation. And you know what, I remember playing this quite fondly, especially on the demo, but now as I have a copy of the game for the PlayStation, is the game any good? Let's find out. Dead or Alive is a 3D fighter that takes influences from Sega's own Virtua Fighter, created by Tomonobu Itagaki, developed by Team Ninja and published by Tecmo in 1996 for the Sega 2 Model 2 hardware, which is the same board for Sega owns Virtua Fighter 2, before being released on home platforms such as the Sega Saturn in 1997 and the PlayStation in 1998. So, the game utilises 3 buttons being hold, punch, kick, which is the standard for most 3D fighters in the 90s.
An hold button? Why a fighting game needs an hold button, bruv?
Good question. Hold button has 2 kind of holds, being an offensive hold and a defensive hold. By holding back or forward on the D-pad or stick alongside with the guard input to either force away your opponent or counter damage them. So it's more of a chance. Sometimes it can be effective at the right timing. Most of the times I seem to get it down, but others have not been so lucky. As for the punch and kick, you can do an array of low, mid and high damage by tapping the D-pad or stick in any direction with the attack to perform. Now, the gameplay itself takes place on the ring, but there is one thing that differs itself from other 3D fighters, and that is the exploding floor. Now, I know environmental hazards are a thing in games such as Tekken and onwards and other future versions of Dead or Alive, but I feel this kind of seems broken, and I hate that it can take a certain amount of health that I have, and I feel that this sort of gimmick itself is really fucking unnecessary. As for the game modes itself, there is a lot of modes which is really fucking generous. You have tournament mode, which acts as the arcade main mode, where you go through 8 fighters in order to complete a game. And just a spoiler, if you want to know what happens at the end of every fighter, you just get rolling credits. That's it. You also get Kumite, which personally should have been called Tournament, may I add, where you go through a series of 30 fights, where you either win or lose in each of them. It doesn't end until you win or lose 30 fights. Team Battle, Time Attack, Survival and Versus are actually pretty standard in this fighting game. Roster wise, you have 9 playable characters with 2 unlockable characters that is exclusive to the PlayStation. And speaking of those characters, 4 of them being Lei Fang, Kasumi, Tina and Ayane all share one aspect that Dead or Alive is known for.
32 big nipple breasts.
So yeah, this game has an option where you can turn the jiggle physic ons and see breasts bounce. Now, if you're a young boy or a lesbian, these may look kinda hot, but in hindsight with how graphically the PS1 turned out 30 years later since its release, graphically it looks silly. Now, I am a fan of bouncing breasts in fighting games as much as the next person, and I am an avid player when it comes down to characters such as Mai Shiranui from Fatal Fury or the King of Fighters games, Mai Nasumi from BlazBlue Central Fiction, and Baiken from the Guilty Gear games. However, if you don't like bouncing breasts on your video game, well, you can turn them off. Graphically, the models kind of actually look somewhat decent for 1998 standard, especially on the PlayStation. I mean, okay, Granted, the graphics of the PS1 didn't necessarily age well, but it's still a competent fighter nonetheless, because you can still move, do punches, holds, and all the most part. And you know what? These actually don't all look too bad. I mean, with the addition of jiggle physics, which kind of turns off the game, for me personally, I still think that these models don't look as bad. I'm actually kind of glad that they actually look somewhat pleasing, despite that it's still 32-bit. So, is the game any good? For the most part, yeah. I would say it is a competent fighter. I think the only thing that kind of turns me away from this game is the exploding floors and silly bouncing breasts. Okay, I know this was Itagaki's vision and he actually made quite a fortune off this series. Since this one particular game for the PlayStation 1 and Sega Saturn, there has been many games in this franchise that have vastly improved the game, while jiggle physics are still maintained in the other games, and the exploding floors are gone, which is a good thing. I think that playing this now would kind of seem somewhat redundant considering how better the other games are. Anyway, if this has been good and you want to play it, you can access copies on eBay that range from between £14 to £30, especially depending on which versions, be it the Japanese or the PAL version. And if you don't possess a PS1, I think most of you know what to do. With that being said, remember to like, comment and subscribe if you so choose to. I've been Saku. Fuck off.